Assalamu alaikum and welcome to a new series of The Struggle Within on Ahlulbayt TV. This is episode 3, where we are examining some of the aspects of our religion, of Islam, related to the cultivation of our spirituality, the striving for perfection, but also looking at the rational basis for the belief in God and the rational basis for why we should be following the path of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam. And again, my guest is Sayed Hassan Al-Sadr, who's going to talk us through these points. So, Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
In this episode, we're going to be talking about the fairness of God, the justice, which is a principle of belief in religion. And of course, this is, one of the biggest points of discussion and one of the probably main reasons why a lot of people decide, no, there can't be God. Because animals suffer, the innocents suffer, calamities happen. So if God is all-powerful, then why didn't he stop it? Does it mean that he's not just? He had the power to stop something bad happening, but he didn't. Does it mean that he's actually not all-powerful? In that case, why should I believe in a God that isn't all-powerful? So a lot of people stop at that point.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
But inshallah, we will find some
Inshallah.
Rational arguments.
Inshallah.
For,
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much for raising the question of the justice of the Creator. Before we start answering this fundamental question, which, as you rightly stated, it represents one of the main principles of our faith, that despite God, the Creator, having so many attributes, scholars decided to choose this particular one, justice, fairness, select this particular one and classify it as one of the main principles of Islam, even though the Creator has other attributes indeed. But this specific one has so many implications, as you've stated. Before we discuss the issue, I would like to remind the viewers that there are certainties in life, there are conclusions out there that we reach with certainty, firmness, 100% true, if we use rationality, if we use logic, like we've done in the previous episodes. And there are uncertainties, possibilities, possible explanations for events, possible explanations for those calamities. I'd like to remind myself and the viewers that we should not compromise the certainties for possibilities. Things that could be true, could not be true. One must start using the rational process from the beginning and continue throughout. The rational process of thinking dictates, as we will discuss in a moment, that the Creator can only be fair. If we reach this certainty with absolute 100% conclusion, then whatever explanations we have for the calamities, for the struggle, for the suffering, then whether people accept them or not, whether the first or the second or the third possible explanation is applicable or not, it should not compromise the certainty.
Right.
And it goes without saying that the possibility or the possible explanation of one event that God may not be fair should never compromise the rational conclusion that God can only be fair. Unfortunately, in the education system, in the media, we are not encouraged to use rationality. As we've discussed previously, some of famous writers, personalities who get a lot of attention in the media and within the education system actually don't have a full appreciation of the rational process of thinking or its application.
Yeah.
They could have a major misunderstanding. So we're not encouraged to think rationally. We are encouraged to think emotionally, with doubts about the Creator, because unfortunately some people like to throw doubts, like people to be living within possibilities, no certainties, and if there are more than one possible explanation, then why commit? Just keep going without certainties, without commitments, without firm belief, essentially leading to people, which we're seeing a growing trend of the unknown, being agnostic. I don't know about the truth. I don't know. Maybe not. If you use rationality, if you apply it rightly, there is no maybe or maybe not. As we've discussed previously, the world exists. Preceding our world, there must have been an entity, and that entity must have been independent, absolutely independent. It does not need anything for its existence. This entity cannot have any limits, cannot have any borders. No limits, no borders, nothing. No shape, no three-dimension, nothing. Thirdly, it is intelligent. It caused our world, it designed our world, so it's fully knowledgeable about our world, wise and intelligent. It created our world, so it must be fully able. And if you combine the second conclusion, it has no limits, with the fourth one, the ability of this entity is limitless. Doesn't have any limits to it, because we said he cannot, or for the moment we say it cannot have limits. It's able, so its ability has no limits. And finally, it's alive, so it's a higher being. That's the rational conclusion of the Creator. If we apply rationality to this question of fairness, and before we discuss the possible explanations in line with this rational conclusion, let's just discuss the attributes of God before we move on to our world. Establish the certainty there, then examine the world. Now, we discussed that the first attribute of the higher being, the entity that existed before our world, is that it must have been independent, completely independent. God, the higher being, cannot need anyone or anything. Fully independent, not in need of anything or anyone. Otherwise our world cannot exist. And since it exists, he must have this attribute of independence. Let's park that on the side and discuss what would push anyone, including the Creator, to be unjust. If we try and narrow down the possible explanations behind anyone treating people unfairly, harming them, being unfair to them, what could be the explanation? I guess people could think of a dictator who needs to stay in power. That's why he or she oppress their people. You could think of a class in society that as a group they discriminate against another group within their society or community. Why? Because they've got certain benefits that they need to protect. And if they are fair to the other group, then everyone will have share of that benefit. So in order for you to stay superior, to stay higher than everybody else, you need to treat others unfairly. People could steal, could commit horrible crimes like killing, kidnapping. Why? Because they want to get something. They want to steal something. There's something that the victim had that the criminal did not have, so that's why they committed the crime. What else? I guess people could say that people could treat others unfairly because they simply don't know how to treat people fairly. Just ignorance, lack of knowledge. And that happens quite frequently on a personal level, when people mistreat others because they don't appreciate their background, they don't have the same social skills, they just basically lack of knowledge. So whether it's a dictator, a class in society, a ruling minority or a majority, a thief, a criminal, it all actually comes down to one basic feature of that person, class or a group. They need something.
Mm-hmm.
They need something.
Right.
They need that wealth, they need that superiority in society, they need that position to stay in power. They need something. That's why they are treating people unfairly. Or it's lack of knowledge. So it's either need or lack of knowledge. And I guess some people are unwise. They've got no needs, they've got the knowledge, they still do it. So they are a bit unwise in their use of resources and abilities. Let's take those two main, or the third one, and let's examine our firm conclusion about the attributes of the Creator. The first of those attributes that the Creator must have had was that He was completely independent. So He cannot be in need of anything. So that's the first possible reason why would someone hurt others, harm others, be unfair to others. They need something. With God, it's completely unapplicable. He's not in need. He's completely independent. And again, He can only be independent. He can only be independent. If you say he's a dependent form of existence, then you've added another, like the example used before, another domino piece to the row of domino pieces. He can only be independent, so He cannot be in need of anyone. So the first possibility of why would He be unfair, we can rule it out. Second possibility, lack of knowledge. Well, God is the creator of the world. He created every single part of it, so He does not lack knowledge. It's very simple and straightforward. Could God be unwise? Well, we said whatever He has with no limits. So knowledge and ability without any limits, adding to it the beauty of this universe, the wisdom behind the universe, He must have wisdom. He must be intelligent without any limits. He must be wise without any limits. So for the three possible reasons why would someone be unfair: in need, not applicable to the Creator; lack of knowledge, not applicable to the Creator; lack of wisdom, not applicable to the Creator. So the rational conclusion, if you follow rationality, and the viewers and everyone is encouraged to do that all the way, is that the Creator of this world can only be fair, because He has no other reason not to be. There is no possibility to why he would not be unfair. This certainty is how we should look at the world, not vice versa. We should not start with events in the world and then examine God and say, why, what happened to that poor child, or that community, or that prophet, or that imam? How could the Creator do this to him? You should say the other way around. You should start examining the Lord, because the Creator is ultimately the center of our journey. He's the goal of the journey. He's the center of the journey. He should be present at every moment. And that is how the prophets and the imams led their life, always focusing on Him. If you start with Him first, you reach the certainty that He can only be fair.
So then we have, obviously, we need to have answers for the suffering in the world. Sometimes people have the view that suffering can help to bring people back to Allah. As an example, I think Imam Al-Sadr said that there is one entrance to paradise for those who have had serious illnesses.
Indeed.
So suffering can be seen as something maybe outwardly very difficult, but inwardly it can have a lot of benefit. But then there is the suffering of animals that didn't do anything to anyone, or the suffering of children, like you say, or buildings collapsing, as we have seen with the garment industry in Bangladesh. So the question would be, well, if Allah is just, why does He allow this to happen? Doesn't He care about His creation? And why is He allowing them to suffer?
Indeed. Moving from rationality into the application of the world is the right way to do it. Having established with full certainty that He can only be fair, now we try and examine events of our world in line with this certainty.
Right.
In light of this certainty. Any possible explanation that has any hint of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not caring, or being unfair, or not knowing, has to be cancelled out. We cannot hold any such thoughts or ideas or conclusions. They're easily and quickly dismissed based on the rational conclusion that He can only be fair. But what are the possibilities? What are the explanations? And according to the Quran, the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, the narrations of Ahlulbayt, who are the exclusive inheritors of the knowledge of the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and according to the research of our scholars who've studied their knowledge and have written about it, there are 8 possible explanations for all such calamities and sufferings and hardship. Every single hardship, calamity, disaster, illness could have one of those possible explanations or more, but none that would hint to the Lord being unfair, because rationally He can only be fair. To start with, number one, let's remind ourselves that the end of this life is not really the end. In other words, death is not the end.
Yeah.
And in fact, whilst we are at this first point to remember that the end of this life is not the end, it's worth sharing with the viewers the important conclusion about the existence of the hereafter, which is again one of the main principles of Islam, that there is life after death, or that there is life after death, or that death is not the end. It cannot be the end.
Yeah.
How do we make that conclusion? In a very simple way, without even opening the Quran, and we will open the Quran later on to find out how these are all in the Quran. But before even we start opening it, moving from the firm conclusion that God can only be fair into the observation of this world, that there are some very clear events which are unfair are taking place. For example, a criminal, a dictator who commits such horrible crimes that affects, negatively of course, affects the lives of millions of people, generations to come after him, because of his personal decisions and the group that surrounds him. How could that dictator suddenly just die, disappear off the face of the earth, and not be accountable?
Yeah.
Not being judged, not paying the price for what he has done. You have a firm conclusion that God is fair, can only be fair, and you have this man, an example. Unfortunately, there are quite a few examples in modern history and in the history of mankind in general. How could he or she die without any accountability? And any form of accountability in this life is not enough, because what, would you put someone in prison and you think that's enough accountability for ruining the lives of generations?
That's a good point, yes.
That's not really accountability. That's you stopping him from further destruction.
Yeah.
But what about the consequences of his destruction over his years in reign, 20, 30 years? Certainty, God is fair. Observation, there is no fairness in this world. Why? Because death is ending this world. Hence the only conclusion that death is not the end. There must be life after death, in which the justice of Allah will be demonstrated.
Okay.
So this is a very simple way of us proving, even before we open the Quran, and we need to open the Quran, even before we do that, that there is life after death, and death is not the end. So for any Muslim or non-Muslim watching out there, certainty, God is fair. What you see in the world of injustices, death is ending the chapter of that human being in this life, but that chapter is still open. There is life after death. There must be life after death. Now for us to know what kind of life, the details of that life, what will happen after death, rationality and logic stop here.
Okay.
We need further resources to explain.
Thank you.